there everybody, this is Caitlin here, and today we are back with Force of Will deck profiles. We now have the last set for Alice Cluster, Battle for Attoractia, and as I said, I'm going to be doing some new deck profiles for you today. Today we're going to be updating one of my favourite ones. It's actually one of the deck profiles that I have on my channel that has had over 1,000 views in its 2 iterations, at least I think double that even. So we're going to be looking at Sylvia again, but instead of the spell burn, we're going to be taking a slightly different aspect of it. We're going to be changing it up into spell control somewhat. It's kind of like a mix between spell burn, spell control. I'm still going to be calling it spell burn, but like we'll be calling it like 3.0 at this point because it's already had a revamp. So it's spell burn 3.0, but technically it's more control because we've dropped quite a few cards that have like had the burn aspect of it, but there is still quite a lot of, you know, flames and burning and, you know, death with our lovely fiery mistress here, the great Sylvia, who is sort of like my channel mascot at this point because I love her. She's like my favourite of the rulers that we've had. She's one of my favourite characters, and, you know, it makes me really sad that, according to the lore or whatever from the official Force of Will website, she is dead, which, spoiler alert if, like, you haven't did that, but according to their lore, I don't know whether it's been confirmed or yet not, but it seems to be the legit Sylvia is dead. Makes me very sad to know that, but, you know, she's still there in my heart. She's still my fave girl from this series. So she is obviously our ruler. And, you know, if you've seen my 2 previous Sylvia deck profile videos, you should know what she does by now. She, you know, she has the judgment of 1 fire, 1 green, and, you know, 2 void, and our fire magic stones can produce green. And we flip her over into her draconic majesty that she is, mother to the dragon. She has flying, she has swiftness, she's 1,000, she is epic. You should probably know by now what she does, but as a little reminder, when this card enters our field, she deals 1,000 damage to a target J/Resonator. And whenever a J/Resonator that was dealt damage by this card this turn is destroyed, you may recover up to 3 target magic stones you control. So she is obviously the best card. Well, in my opinion, she's one of the best rulers that we have. As opposed to, I know a lot of people didn't like the rulers that came out with Battle for Attoractia. I know there was mixed opinions on them, mainly because like the ruler sides were all the same and the J ruler sides were maybe not as great as they could be, and obviously with the introduction of the Black Moonbeam, people are a little bit scared to be running J ruler dependent decks, so they want to like run decks that aren't so heavily J ruler dependent because they're scared of it. But I say, nay, I love Sylvia, and I will use her, and she will probably be my favourite deck for all time. So, going into our Resonators for this list, you'll see quite a few returning characters here, a couple of new additions, in terms of, like, our little army for Sylvia here. The first one being, we're going to be keeping Rukh Egg. Now, as you'll see, I've swapped out the art. It's now the newer card, which was the reprint, which we got in Moonlit Saviour. I'll pick up the non-shiny version just so you can read it better. Obviously, this is the Rukh Egg. It's the 1-drop with 200 defense, 0 attack. It can't attack because obviously it's an egg. And when it is put into the graveyard, we can search our deck for a fire Resonators, reveal it, and put it in our hand and shuffle our deck. So I decided to still keep this because, 1, it's a great way to search out for fire Resonators if we haven't, you know, gotten the chance to pull that many in our hand. 2, it will be the only Resonator that will die on a mechanic that we will be using, but, you know, it's still hitting the graveyard, so that means we can still use its effect. And, you know, it's still a good little chump blocker for us while we're setting up, so it is pretty good to run. I'm running it still at 4 because, you know, it's a 1-drop, and I would prefer to run my 1-drops at 4 just so that we can get that extra kind of, like, stall game for, like, the initial couple of turns when we've only got a small amount of stones. And the second 1-drop that we run is, of course, the Flame Sprite. Probably my favourite, maybe 1-drop fire. Pardon me. That's next to the, what am I even talking about? Next to the Rukh Egg, sorry. That, there's a bit of wind caught in my neck. My throat there just distracted me. Apologies. So the Flame Sprite, obviously, is our 1-drop Swiftness Fairy who flies. So many Fs there. 200 attack and 300 defense, so it will not die to a mechanic that we'll be utilising in this deck. And obviously, if we wish, we can tap it and deal 100 damage to target Resonator for each fairy we control, but we're not really using it for that because there's no other fairies in this deck. So that will be for our 1-drops. Now, introducing a new character to our arsenal, one guy who is like quite a favourite of mine in the pre-releases, we got the true successor of Certo, Volga. I actually have I have one of the full arts of it. I really need to get a playset of full arts. Right now I've only got one, and I have like one foil one and two normal ones. But I'll pick up the normal one here so you can actually read it, because it's kind of hard to read in the camera light here. So he's a 2-drop, 400, 400. But what he does is whenever this card is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to your opponent. Now, this has many great things to it, because we can use this to kind of psych our opponent out. We're not going to be using this to be blocking damage from, little things, which he could easily survive, but, we want to wait until our opponent decides to attack with something big, because then we will punish them for that. I remember I was playing this in the pre-release and someone had Hades out, and he decided, oh, I'm going to swing for the 14-14. I think that's how much Hades has. And he's like, yeah, cool. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'm going to block with Volga, and you're going to take that 14-14 and drop their health down to 2, which was quite fun. After they'd spent the entire game trying to rack up their health points up with Life Profiteering Priest, but I digress. So Volga is one of my new favourites, and as you can see, it looks like he's got the Laevateinn sword, so apparently he was maybe possessed by the mad sword himself, but we don't really know too much about Volga at this point. But yeah, Volga is one of my new favourites, and obviously I know he's only 400, so he can technically die to Unseen Pressure, but we want to do our best to try and keep him alive, just so we can wait for when our opponent swings in for something big and we can block it and make them suffer for their incompetence. But next up, our other 2-drop that we have is we have a playset 4 of the Lancelots. We're keeping Lancelot because, well, Lancelot is just so good. It's like one of the other amazing like red cards that we have in this set in Alice Cluster. You probably already know what Lancelot does. You've seen it a couple of times before, but just a little reminder. She has 600, 600. She's got swiftness, and as you choose to attack, you have to choose this one first, obviously. And whenever this card attacks, if its attack is 1,000 or more, it deals 700 damage to target Resonator. And we can pay 1 fire will, and we can give it another extra 100. But it is a really good 2-drop. So next to, we're going to be using a card which I'll be explaining when we're going over spells and stuff, that will work really, really well with Lancelot. You'll see in a little minute if I clear these cards away and don't drop them. And going into our 3-drops, we actually have 2 different 3-drops that we'll be utilising. We will be running 4 of Pricia, the Pursuant of Explosive Flame. And we will also have 4 of the Athena, the Titan of Revenge. I will just move these up here so you can see these. I actually have a play set of the full art ones here. Sadly, don't have a play set of full art Pricias, but we will, maybe one day I will get my deck all pimped out and shiny and beautiful. But anyway, Pricia here, she is a 1 green, 1 fire, and 1 void. She's 700, 400. She has swiftness, target attack, and first strike. You can pay a green, and she gains flying for a turn. And whenever she is put into the graveyard from your field, it deals 500 damage to our opponent. So this card is insanely good. Even for its low defense, we really don't mind that much, because even if she dies, we can still punish our opponent with that 500 damage. It may not seem like a lot, but when she's hitting for 700 already, and we can make her fly, so then we can even even if our opponent has some way of say they bow her, she still dies, they'll get 500 taken off as well. So they'll take, well, I'm not quite sure how the sequence works, because if you say you gave her flying and you attacked for 700 and your opponent responded, okay, I'm going to bow, would that attack still go through, or would that kill her before the attack hits? I'm not quite sure, because I know there's a kind of sequence of stuff where it's I declared this attack to them, they declared that they're going to bow, does my attack still resolve, or do I just die first? I'm not too sure. I'll need to double check how that works. But Pricia is good, and I love her, which is why she's staying in this deck from the last build that we had. And then we have Athena, who is also one of my faves. She's 700, 700, so she's kind of got the butt of a bulkier defense compared to Pricia. She's also a 3-drop, so she can be searched out by one of our spells. She gets swiftness, and whenever damage is dealt to us, then you can put 2 100 counters on her, and we can pay a fire and deal 100 damage to each of us. So we can essentially, I'd say stab ourselves, and, our opponent for just 100 health, which is not too bad in the long run, and we can buffer up by 200 each time, which is pretty nice. So that's why we're keeping these 2 lovely ladies in the deck. And you'll notice that I dropped Gill, the Golden Dragon dude, from this deck, because, yeah, I'm going to be trying to build decks from now on that do not rely on Grim Cluster cards, because, as you know, rotation is a thing. I know it's not happening till September, but I want to try and like say prepare people, or at least give people an insight into how decks will look now on when we don't have ground cards to access. I know that there's going to be like some kind of format that will allow for that kind of format, or like we have access to all the cards, or maybe I don't know if we'll still have access to Valhalla. Probably not, because there's a couple of mechanics in Valhalla that are not really legal anymore, but I digress. It's like we're going to be looking forward to it, because I think the next AGP that's happening in the UK, which is in August, which sadly I can't go to because I'm my dog sitting my dog and I can't go to it, sadly. I know it's Alice Cluster only, and I think they are still going to include Vingolf 2, because Vingolf 2 will be out by then. So that is it's also one of the reasons why in these decks I'm including Jewel Stones, for the purpose of knowing that they're getting reprinted in Vingolf 2. So that's the reason why they're still here. They're just the old art in place of when the new stuff comes out. But going on to our spells that we're running some of the same spells that we had in the other deck, but we're going to make a couple of changes just so you can see what I mean, with like more of a control basis than too much burn. So we're keeping 3 of our Rapid Growth, because Rapid Growth is amazing. I totally love it. It's got the Remnant ability, obviously, and you know, we can play it like twice for each one. So essentially we can get 6 usage out of these 3 cards, which is really nice. And you know what it does. It gives 400/400 to a J/Resonator until the end of the turn, which is, you know, lovely, especially with comboing with a couple of other things that we have. A new card that we have for this deck is that we have replaced Thunder with a Demonflame. That was one of the things I was always thinking about when it came to rotation and it came to replacing some of our old cards. I was thinking, well, what can replace Thunder? And ideally, Demonflame is the thing to replace it. I know it doesn't really target our opponent, so we can't just like outright damage them with it. But it's even better because you can either deal 500 damage to a target there, or destroy something that's already taken damage. So we can even swing with something. They block it and they're like, oh yeah, my thing lives, but it's like, psych, I'm destroying it this turn because it's taking damage. So we're running it at 4, just because I like 4. 4 is a good spell like that. We are also keeping in Flame King Shout for the purposes of when our opponent has got cards that can't be targeted by things. So like I know whenever I'm playing William and he is using his beasts and he's got his like stupid rat out, which means that things can't be targeted, that is super annoying. So my way to work around it is I usually have Flame King Shout, and like I use that to at least like wear them down by 400, you know, because it doesn't target, it deals it to everything, so that's good. And obviously we can even put out a Fire Resonator, so even though it costs 3, we're still getting some good use out of it, because we can use that to get Lancelot, we can get Pricia, we can get Athena, we can even, if we wanted to, we could get Volga out. And you know, we're not really attacking with Volga, but you know, he can come out there. So as long as we know that we've got something in our hand that we can make good use out of, then we don't mind playing this, you know, and dealing 400 to everything. And looking at what's next. Oh yeah, and then we're still running. Well, I'm running 2 of the Burn to Cinders. I mainly keep this in because I quite like how it can target J rulers as well. So obviously it's 700 damage to a J/Resonator. And as far as I'm aware, I'm not quite sure how many. Like I think this was mainly I use it against Dark Alice in terms of with William. I can't remember how much defense Dark Alice actually has. I think it's enough to kill her, but I'm not too sure. I can't remember off the top of my head. But obviously, if it's attacking it with a J ruler, if it's a J ruler, it loses imperishable until the end of the turn. So that's mainly the reason why I'm keeping it in, because William loves to back Dark Alice up with Schrodinger, and obviously if Schrodinger gets out and he has removed a certain number of cards from my deck, then he can get imperishable on Alice and whatnot. So it is quite annoying, so that's why I'm running it at 2, just in case. And now we are looking at some of the new stuff that we're keeping in it. That we're including in this deck. One of them being it's Flame Trap. I was about to say Blood Trap, but it's Flame Trap. One of the other things is called Blood Boil, and I think that's what confused me. It's a spell, chant, standby. It's 3 cost, but you know, we can put it down for 2. And you know, it triggers as long as we have at least 3 stones. At least that's how I believe trigger chance standbys work, because I was getting confused with how this mechanic worked. I was always under the assumption that you could put it down for 2 costs, and then when the trigger effect happened, it could go into effect, but apparently you need to have the cost of what the card is, not necessarily ready to be played, but you can have them tapped and it would still happen, at least I think, because I'm always a wee bit confused with the wording of it, because it was it's really quite a wee bit confusing. So I need to double check that. But as far as I'm aware, you can still put it down for 2 void, and then when its condition has been met, as long as you have the 3 stones that it's needed to play it just by hand, then it can flip and do its thing. At least correct me if I'm wrong, because I may actually be wrong. But I believe that is how it still works. So anyway, Flame Trap, what it does is, its trigger is, if you control a fire magic stone and your opponent controls 4 or more Resonators, this card deals 800 damage to each Resonator your opponent controls. Now this is mainly to combat things that like to swarm the field with stuff. So this is mainly going after, say, machines, because I've seen that machines are making a comeback now that we've got all this new machine support. And as anyone knows, machines love to swarm the field. This is also really good against, say, Dark Alice if they're running shadows, because obviously shadows like to swarm, as do, 4 Sacred Beasts. They like to build up a huge arsenal, or maybe even stuff that's like Rezard with his stealth things and everything that they flip in and more stuff comes in. So really, this is like looking at decks that like to swarm. They like to fill up their field with lots of stuff and like, yeah, you think you can hit me now? And that's why we're really running this. Only running it at 3, because I feel like running it at 4 would be a bit too much, because how many times in the game are they going to have like a full board of stuff, like 4 or more things? So that's only the reason that we're running it at 3. And then even if like we don't actually play it, we can even just put it down and like psych out our opponent with like, what are we running that we're going to put it down. And the next thing we have is we have 2 of the high speed dash, which I totally love because the artwork for it is so cute. We've got Kaguya there flailing out because she's dropped her hat and all her bunnies are panicking. They're like, what are you doing, Kaguya? I'll pick up this one because I can't actually read it on the full art because it's too shiny in the light. But it's 1 green drop, and we can choose to put our J ruler into our ruler's area as a ruler, or return a target Resonator I controlled to our hand. Now the main reason I'm including this one is because we obviously dropped Gilderai the Golden Dragon, which was like our big finisher if we could get him out. But even though people are a little bit scared to run their J rulers because of obviously the Black Moonbeam thing, I feel confident in Sylvia. When Sylvia enters, obviously she deals 1,000 damage to something, and if we kill it, we recover our stones. And she's got swiftness and flying, so she can even hammer in. All we need to do is like keep at least 1 stone open, one that's like green stone or whatever, so that in order to produce green. And, if our opponent decides to attack our Sylvia, then we can just, like, flip it back over. As far as I'm aware, you cannot chase Black Moonbeam. I'm not too sure. Like, I'm pretty sure that was the case, because I know there was an argument for it because people were, like, freaking out because of how OP it was. Like, oh my god, we can't stop the Black Moonbeam, so our J-Rulers are going to be dead. So I'm pretty sure you can't chase it. But if they outright, say, attacked your J-Ruler, you could still use the high-speed dash and, flip your ruler back over to its normal side, and then you could just J-activate again, or Judgment, the next turn, or whatever, because you've got your stones all back. And it would be fine, because she's not technically an Astral Ruler, so that's fine. And, you can still deal the effect again, or deal 1,000 damage. So you could essentially save her, swing in again, and you'd be dealing, like, 2,000, well, no, you'd be dealing another 1,000 damage, but if you'd already, like, attacked the previous turn, then that's 2,000 damage overall for flying, which is pretty good. And then I'm only running it 2, because I feel like there's no point in, like, running a playset 4 of it, because why would we, like, do that, like, with Sylvia? There's no way we'd actually, like, flip her back over for, like, 4 times. Like, that's, like, unreal. And last but not least for our spells is we have... Oops, I dropped it. I dropped them. We have 2 of Battle for Attoractia, which is obviously the name drop for the set. We have this. It has the Remnant ability, so obviously we can play it from the grave. And it's really replacing our Sylvia's Roar, because I felt like Sylvia's Roar was a bit redundant, considering that we don't have any dragons other than Sylvia running in this deck. So I felt like this was a good replacement, which is target J/Resonator your control, and target J/Resonator your opponent control, deal damage equal to their attack to each other. So I felt like that was a good replacement for Sylvia's Roar, because I just felt it was a little bit redundant. When we don't have any dragons, she's our only dragon, and we're not really getting good use out of, like, both of her abilities for running her. So that's the reason why I dropped it and replaced it with 2 of these. And finally, we're looking at a Regalia and Addition. So we're running 2 of the Laevateinn, the Demon Sword. Simple enough is because, well, it gives swiftness, but we already get swiftness because we've got Sylvia. The main reason we're running it is because we want to get that imperishable. You know, banish this, get the imperishable. It's because we want to prevent Sylvia from ever becoming an astral ruler. Because we need to save her. We need to make sure she stays alive. So that's the reason the Demon Sword is staying with her. And not Melgus or Volga. And finally, the last thing, which is what I've been hyping up or whatever in terms of combos and stuff, is the Blood-Covered War Axe, which I think a lot of people were quite appalled by when it was first spoiled. Obviously, we attach it to Resonator, it gains plus 400 attack, and whenever this card attacks, it deals 200 damage to each other Resonator. Now, this is actually quite fun because we can attach this to, say, our Lancelot. Lancelot then has an attack of 1000, and whenever she swings, she will be doing 700 damage to something outright. She will also be attacking for she'll be attacking for 1000 damage anyway. She will also be ending up attacking Volga for 200 if he's there, so we can deal 200 damage to an opponent as we do that. Other things that happen there, I'm trying to think of any other combos. Well, obviously our Rukh Egg will die. We can search out for a thing. So it does so many different things just by being attached to one thing. And, you know, I probably wouldn't have more than one of these attached to, like, if I had, say, one in my hand, I wouldn't attach them to 2 different Resonators because that would mean an extra 200 damage, and that would mean maybe our Volga would die or blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I would maybe, like, use it as a way to make sure that our opponent doesn't want to attack certain things. You know, just to, like, make sure that everything stays alive. But that's really the main reason that we have it. But obviously, if they find a way to remove our cards, because obviously removal is still a thing and it doesn't affect defense, then that would mean that we would need to have our backup. So that's why we're running 4 of it, because ideally we want to attach one to our Lancelot at least. We'd maybe like to attach one to a Pricia, because Pricia can obviously get flying and we can fly over and use that damage. You know, so many different possibilities. And in terms of our magic stones, really nothing has changed other than the fact that I've taken out the little red pure stone, because obviously that's going to rotate out, so we don't have it anymore. So because we know jewel stones are going to get reprinted, we will run 4 of the stones of Blasting Wave because it has red-green, and red-green is essential for this deck because we now have a little bit more green in the deck. Not by too much, I think we've only increased it by like a little bit, but we have more red-green. And we're just going to be running... is it 6? I'm pretty sure it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 firestones. That's really what we're going to be doing with that. I feel like we don't really need to run any more green because I'm confident in us being able to maybe dropped at least 2 of the jewel stones in any given game. So I feel confident in that. So I feel like we don't need to run, say, a Ruler's Memoria or the First Flight's Memoria or something like that. And finally, in terms of a sideboard, I never usually put up a sideboard because I'm usually quite confident in what we have in the main deck. But just for this deck in particular, I decided to include one thing for the sideboard, and that would be the Enraged Knight. Now, this was a card I also quite liked in the pre-release because most of the people who I was pre-releasing against, they were choosing to run Dark because they got pretty good Dark pulls. And if you know Enraged Knight, I will bring her up here. She is a 2 cost, she's 5/5. If your opponent, as long as your opponent controls a Darkness Magic Stone, this card gains 200 and Swiftness. So, in a way, it's almost like a... almost better, but also not better than Lancelot. In a way, it gets 700 and Swiftness, but and it's a 2-drop. But obviously, that's dependent on whether our opponent is running a Darkstone. So I would maybe only sideboard this in if we know for a fact that our opponent is running Dark, and I maybe wouldn't run the full playset of them. I would maybe like take out. I may even take out like the Rukh Eggs, like in terms of that, because we don't really need to worry about the Rukh Eggs too much because we can get our stuff out. But that's really dependent on whether we know for sure that our opponent is running dark stuff. I just feel like it's like quite a good thing to consider, considering that we know that darkness is like going to be a thing again. So like that's why I want to be prepared for it. But anyway, guys, this has been this deck profile video for my girl Sylvia. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the changes that I've made. What would you class this as? Would you still class this as burn, or would you say it's more leaning towards control? I wouldn't say it's too much of a rush deck now because there's so much like technical stuff with it. But I want to know what your opinion is. Is this rush? Is this burn? Is this control? Just let me know in the comments below what you think of these changes that I've made, and until next time, guys, I will see you all later.